Herodotus lived during the 5th century before the Common Era in ancient Greece. He wrote a narrative summarizing history as it was then known and describing many of the events of his own lifetime. Although direct discussion on his biases and epistemology is saved for the conclusion of the series, on this video you may learn details about a portion of his work. The 6th book, called Erato, Broken Sparta and Athenian Success. The beginning of this book completes the story of the Ionian rebellions. A key figure is a despot of Miletus named Histories. He deceives Darius into setting him free as if he had never intended any rebellion. Subsequently, he betrays the Persian king a second time by gathering over 350 triremes against him. Even though the barbarians had about 600 ships, the Persian commanders were frightened. They decided to promise pardon to any rebel that would surrender without a fight. In the meantime, the rebelling Greeks initially did not give Histories supreme command. Rather, they elected a man named Dionysios. Alas, if the story Herodotus tells is true, the subsequent events are eternal proof of humanity's weakness and imbecility. Dionysios is quoted as telling the volunteer soldiers,
"If ye shall be willing to take upon yourselves hardships, ye will have labor for the time being, but ye will be able to overcome the enemy and be free."
The men agreed, but only for about 7 days. Unaccustomed to the hardships and training that Dionysios instituted, they changed their opinion, their will, and replaced him with Histories. At the battle, the Greeks who had not trained properly were defeated. Herodotus condemns many from Samos for fleeing under the agreement that they would receive pardon. Shameful, truly. I must point out that the failure cannot be attributed to democracy in the army. That practice was ever common among the Greeks and Romans. The problem in this case is best attributed to the inherent or natural softness in humanity. Therefore, the story does lend weight to, for example, Hobbes' view of mankind. Without proper upbringing, training, the best the not-so-hairy monkeys can do is to pray for a good tyrant. Otherwise, all they will have is but the tyranny of stupidity and weakness. As for Histories, he is captured in some later battle, and since the Persian commanders feared that he might deceive the king a second time, they killed him although he already was a prisoner of war. As for the rest of the reconquest of Ionia, Herodotus describes the method the Persians would employ to clear the smaller islands.
They extend themselves from the sea on the north to the sea on the south, each man having hold of the hand of the next, and then they pass through the whole island hunting the people out of it.
The practice seems jocular. There are several other conflicts whose details are not only difficult to follow, but ultimately inconsequential. I can say for entertainment sake that at one point a fleet of Persia is lost in a sea storm and the historians suggest the possibility of sea monsters. LOL. All these operations involve conflicts around the Hellespont, Thracia, and a little-remembered attempt at attacking Athens. After regaining the lost cities and taking most of the islands, Darius sends heralds to all the cities of Greece asking for earth and water, symbols of subjugation. This leads to Cleomenes, the king of Sparta, attacking the Aeginetans for accepting the barbarian demands. This in turn leads to a conflict between the two Spartan kings, which segues into a digression on why one of the kings of Sparta was technically more honored than the other. I will only explain the more jocular elements. First, in a mythic past, the then queen mother of twins did not wish to reveal which of the twins was the elder. Being the elder meant, of course, being the first heir. Lycurgus, the mythic founder of the Spartan civics, spied the queen to check which twin she ever fed, bathed, dressed first. Somehow this would show which twin was the elder. Equally silly, let me quote.
The custom of the Lacedaemonians about the deaths of their kings is the same as that of the barbarians. They beat their foreheads with a good will and make lamentation without stint, saying that this one who has died last of their kings was the best of all.
Surely, presently, some overprivileged first-world self-flagellator would accuse the historian of being culturally insensitive towards the subjects of any monarch. LOL. More relevant history is that Demaratos, the other Spartan king, accused Cleomenes of being illegitimate. He made such an accusation because of mere envy. Such causes are common in Herodotus' histories. You will remember that the prior king had had 2 wives. It turns out that Cleomenes came from a wife that was not pregnant for the minimum amount of time required. Regardless, Cleomenes survives the accusation and in turn accuses Demaratos of being the child of a stable boy. Yes, such are the issues in monarchy. To succeed, the king bribes the prophetess of the oracle. This was later found out, and some of the culprits, including the prophetess herself, were banished. Regardless, in the meantime, Demaratos is deposed and ends up in Asia under the protection of Darius. Herodotus continues praising Demaratos and therefore condemning the Spartans when he credits him as the only king to ever win an Olympic gold medal. Most jocular, Demaratos asked his mother for the truth, and she told him that she did sleep with an apparition 3 days after first sleeping with the king. They could make a television show about this story. I am sure it would sell. Also, the man that replaced Demaratos, a certain Leotychides, was later banished from Sparta as he took bribes from certain barbarians. It should be noted that the kings did not go through Spartan education. Skipping ahead, Cleomenes leaves Sparta for a time as the scandal of bribing the oracle makes him unpopular. While living in a foreign land, he contemplates invading Sparta, and even though some in the Senate try to help him,
forthwith a disease of madness seized him, who had been even before this somewhat insane, began to maltreat himself from the legs upwards. For he went on cutting his flesh lengthways from the legs to the thighs, and from the thighs to the loins and flanks, until at last he came to the belly. And cutting this into strips, he died in that manner.
I found all the prior most funny and important. It is an underemphasized case of Spartan corruption and institutional failure. I wonder what the likes of Machiavelli would say of it. Since he thought Sparta's government was the best that could ever be, I guess he would say it is as good as it gets among the not-so-hairy monkeys. Herodotus digresses into the possible reasons for Cleomenes' madness. He mentions 3 theories. According to the men of Argos, it was divine punishment for his military cruelty. According to the Spartans, it was because while he lived with the Scythians, he drank unmixed wine. According to the historian, it was retribution for the impious treachery against Demaratos. Returning to the incoming Persian invasion, I quote,
"There happened more evils to Hellas than during the 20 other generations which came before Darius, some of the evils coming to it from the Persians, and others from the leaders themselves of Hellas warring together for supremacy."
This is most tragic given as Herodotus is speaking before the Pan-Hellenic War. He does not even know about the horrors that will come after. And to think that all of this at the same time that philosophy and Western culture are beginning to bloom. The historian describes how, upon learning of Darius' attack, the Athenians send the whole of their own men, under the command of their 10 elected generals, to confront the Persians near the town of Marathon. One of the 10 generals, or strategos, was the now most famous Miltiades. Pay attention because what follows is one of the eternal highlights of human history. First, the runner Phidippaides is sent to ask aid from the Spartans, who reply that they may not go until a certain religious duty is passed. On his way, Phidippaides reports he encountered Pan, the divinity. This is the divinity of panic, most valuable to all martial ventures. The god told the messenger that he will help if the Athenians promise to honor him. As a result, after the battle, a temple was made in its honor at the Acropolis. I believe the temple, or sanctuary, was made in a cave on one of the sides of the Acropolis, but I am not sure. Funny enough, a son of the previously ousted tyrant was serving as a guide to the Persian army. This man, allegedly, had suffered a disappointing vision or dream. Ergo, while disembarking he tripped, fell, and lost a tooth in the sand. When he stood up, he said that his vision had come true, for the little of Attica that truly belonged to him was now possessed by the tooth. LOL. As for the battle, Herodotus has it that the Athenians defeat the Persians, and only then do the Persians try to circumvent the Athenian position. Other historians say that the Athenians only attacked the Persians after they had already divided their forces, aiming to perform the previously mentioned operation. Either way, Miltiades is credited for convincing the other elected generals to charge rather than hold a defense height. Let me emphasize that, be it as it may have been, they attacked despite being greatly outnumbered.
For they were the first of all the Hellenes about whom we know who went to attack the enemy at a run, And they were the first also who endured to face the Median garments and the men who wore them, whereas up to this time the very name of the Medes was to the Hellenes a terror to hear.
Of course, this was a blessed day for humanity, as in the later Battle of Salamis, had things been otherwise. Perhaps progress would have ever been arrested by hereditary tyranny. The battle cost the Athenians exactly 192 men. By comparison, incredibly, the barbarians lost over 6,000. I must make clear, though I will not provide the specifics, a large factor in such casualty ratios is the meritocracy inherent in the military democracy of civilized nations. No such thing has existed in most of the alleged Western world since the fall of the Roman Republic. After the battle, the Athenians had to deal with the force that was sent to circumvent their position. Therefore, they quickly moved to where they expected the Persians would make a second landing. Being still in their boats and not willing to attempt a contested landing, the barbarians were forced to abandon the whole campaign. It was then, after all the fighting had finished, that a Spartan force showed up. These were most disappointed with themselves to see the Athenians had succeeded without their help. Note, in a single military operation the Athenians protected the city, defeated the Persians, defeated what remained of Pisistratus, and even humiliated the Spartans. As such, these events entered the Athenian national myth or historical narrative. Herodotus celebrates it, and just about everyone in the Western world ever praises it. After all these events, there is a mention of the family that was most key or essential in deposing the previously mentioned tyrant. What is worthy of record is how the mention segues into the genealogy of Cleisthenes and Pericles. The two were related and both were essential to the progress of humanity. The one a founder of democracy, the other not only furthered it to unparalleled levels, but oversaw the Athenian Golden Age. The latter is not to hero worship. As the philosopher Cratopus of Pergamum might say, they were merely those most influential at the time democracy came about. After the Persians were defeated, Miltiades convinced the Athenians to give him command of an army with the intention of attacking a certain Greek city that had allegedly aided the Persians. The description of the events segues into a description of a feud the Athenians had with the Lemians. On the latter, the historian is basically disputing the facts with another historian. Unfortunately, very little of this other historian survives. Whatever may be the true cause of the feud, whether Athenian envy or Lemian unwarranted violence, it is clear that the latter kill a host of Athenian women and children. Yes, the Lemians had stolen the women, used them as concubines, but the children that resulted grew to consider themselves Athenians. As such, fearful that the children, when they reached adulthood, would take over Lemnos, the same men that had impregnated the women, killed them and the children. Most horrid. As such, the expression Lemnian deed came to signify a deed of great cruelty. In the end, and to finish the summary of the sixth book, Miltiades captured the city of Lemnos. In the next book, Xerxes, the son of Darius, begins a gigantic invasion of Greece. This includes a description of the famous battle at Thermopylae. If you don't know how we got to this point, be sure to watch the prior videos. Now, to pique your curiosity, to motivate you to watch the last video of the series, I gift you a teaser sample of one of the many aphorisms I crafted as I read this author.
If you feel your happiness never lasts, that is not because your future is always bad. Rather, it is because you are ever jealous of the past.
If you enjoy or gain from my aphorisms, know that I have thousands. I will be writing books with short thematic essays composed out of aphorisms. These essays are profound and intriguing yet easy to read. For very cheap copies, look up Protagoras Pause in the Amazon website. I repeat, Protagoras Pause, that's my name.